All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Patterson Report. I'm Brandon. He's Ryan. And bit of an up and down episode this week. So we're going to kick off with the team that's currently not letting us down, and then we'll eventually circle back to the team that I have unfortunately hitched my wagon to every winter since 2003. But we'll start off with the Eagles because they had what many consider, myself included, to be their first big test of the season last Sunday against the Baltimore Ravens. I know the Commanders game was a big deal, but Jaden Daniels isn't Lamar. I mean, that Commander defense isn't the Baltimore defense. I just think it's on a different scale. And they gave us a scare early on. I mean, 9-0, that team looked like the first 4 weeks of the season, but I kind of felt better the fact that we got off to a slow start and then pulled it together. I was like, if this team can play shit football for a quarter and then, flip the switch like great teams are able to do and turn it around, then we might really have something here. And that's exactly what the Eagles did for the second, third, and fourth quarter last Sunday night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in terms of expected points added, the Ravens are having a historical season. The Commanders are good and they're way well past their schedule. But don't get me wrong, the Ravens were having a top 10 season all time offensively, and the Eagles just went in there and shut them down. So,
yeah, I mean, it was a Vic Fangio masterclass. Holding that offense to 12 points is absolutely ridiculous. And on the offensive side for the Eagles, it was ugly for most of it. As has kind of been the theme this year, Jalen Hurts did enough to to have a respectable passing attack, and then you just wait for Saquon to burst through. It was always going to happen. Probably his worst first half as an Eagle, I would say, by the numbers. Even the third quarter was kind of pedestrian, but man, he's gonna wear you down. No matter how long you keep him down, you're not going to keep him down for a full game. And you saw it in the fourth quarter. I mean, Baltimore just had nothing left in the tank, and he still had plenty to go. The O-line still had plenty to go. And man, when you're able, as a football team, to in the fourth quarter just salt away time like the Eagles do, it's a great luxury to have.
it's an absolute fantastic luxury to have. I mean, you have Jalen Hurts who can run the football. You have Saquon Barkley to run the football. You have A.J. Brown on a quick little slant if you need a money completion. You could beat him in any way you want. So this Eagles team has that vibe around it. I'm not going to say anything, but it has that vibe. It has that vibe. I don't want to say anything, but yeah, it's just the fourth quarter. Saquon has the fourth most rushing yards. I think that still stands in the fourth quarter alone.
I believe it.
He'd be fourth overall in the fourth quarter.
I mean, you watching that game, you were just hoping to win. First through third, you figured, okay, you know what? Saquon finally ran up against an immovable force. I mean, that Baltimore run defense was, for the most part, really as advertised. I mean, they are a great run defense, and we knew that coming in. And it looked like, okay, you know what? Saquon is human. Somebody can stop him, whatever. I would have never believed you if you told me he was going to finish that game still with over 100 scrimmage yards. I mean, I don't think it's possible to keep him under that, no matter what you do.
Yeah, it's pretty tough for defenses to stop. I just want this team to start faster. The bit going on is crazy.
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw the stat, but through the first two drives that are typically scripted, the Eagles are last in expected points added. For the rest of the game, they're first.
Which is, and you brought up a great point, because those first two drives, you'll come into a game with 15 scripted plays and adjust from there. So, I mean, for as much praise as I've given this coaching staff, and I think all in all, I mean, to right the ship the way they did, it's been a great coaching season for the Eagles. It is kind of astounding at how you can week in and week out get the game planning and the first two drives so terribly wrong. But you know what? On the flip side of that, it's equally impressive that how quickly they're able to make in-game adjustments every single game. And, after the first two drives, understand what they're doing to stop them and come up with a plan on the spot to beat it. So I would like to start faster too. Kellen Moore mentioned it. Nick Sirianni mentioned it. I'm sure they're frustrated with it. I don't really care how the hell we start as long as we keep playing 3/4 of the game the way that we're playing. There's not a team in football other than Detroit, which sucks. But
they're not right now.
Dude, Detroit's a problem. But every other team in the league, I think we could get down 9 or 10 like we did against Baltimore and still claw our way out of the hole.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they're up there in the tier 1 of teams. I mean, of course, mentioned Detroit. Kansas City's got to be mentioned, even though they've been terrible.
Kansas City has huge Eagles 2023 vibes, dude.
They do.
They're narrowly winning, but then I'm sure, you hear the storylines too. Travis Kelce's overall having a down year. He and Pat Mahomes can't seem to get on the same page. Pat and Xavier Worthy aren't even reading the same book, it seems, most of the time. It's just a dysfunctional Chiefs team that continues to win, but I remember a dysfunctional Eagle team that continued to win, and eventually that runs out.
Yeah, it does run out. The magic always runs out, but it feels like the Chiefs have some more in the tank. They always do. But back to the Eagles, like the Chiefs team feels like 2023 Eagles, while this team feels like the Eagles of old that won it all. So like it feels really good. Like the vibes are high, like we said.
Yeah,
and
teams having fun.
You see the meme? It was like Eagles at 10-2 last year, and with SpongeBob like all sad, and now it's the Eagles at 10-2 this year, and he was like, that's just how the feeling around this town is. It's Super Bowl or bust at this point.
It really is. We came into the year feeling that way. Then I think things got a little bit shifted around to 2-2, but then everybody's back in. And I think that's possible. One of the big things that I judged this Eagles team on, and the teams in general. The Phillies, we talk about it. It's one of the reasons the Sixers are terrible. The chemistry on this team is through the roof right now. You see. When Gainwell rips off a huge run, Saquon's first guy off the bench to hype him up. The second there, if anybody makes a play, CJ GJ, who his performance this season aside, he's gotten better. He's been an awesome tone setter on defense to where it feels like he's kind of the enforcer that team was missing. You saw those great mic'd up clips with Zach Vaughn a couple times where Nick Sirianni would make a call on offense going forward and 4th and short, midfield, knowing that his defense could hold the line, and then you see guys like Zach Vaughn go out and talk to the young guys, talk to Nakobe, talk to Quinion, talk to Sweat, whoever. You know why Nick made that call? It's because he believes in us, man. Like Nick trusts. Like you're starting to see that that Eagles culture that in 17 was there, that in 22 was there. That's starting to come back out, and that's pretty awesome.
It is pretty awesome. You have people stepping up all over the place. You have Zach Vaughn, who's having arguably an all-pro kind of season. It's absolutely incredible. Nakobe Dean is living up to the draft hype. And, Howie doesn't value linebackers, but he didn't invest too much into these guys, and they're paying off in a massive way. And I think that's like a big part of the success. Obviously that and replenishing the depth at corner with Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell, who we've talked about more than enough, but they deserve to be talked about all the time at this point.
Absolutely.
So it's just one of those things where the season feels special and the vibes are high.
Yeah. You mentioned the young guys, and I feel like one of the telltale signs that, you're going to have a great team, and especially, that Howie's having a good year. You remember 2017 and how many one-year deal guys turn into impact players. And, LeGarrette Blount, Ajayi wasn't a one-year guy. He was a mid-season acquisition. You had, the secondary was largely one-year guys. You had Torrey Smith on the outside. Like, there were so many acquisitions that turned into, huge pieces that year. And then you look at this year's team, and, you got guys like Zach Vaughn, who's kind of the story of the NFL. I would like to have locked him up this week as something's going to happen, but he's going to get a monster payday in this offseason. He's the best Eagles linebacker. I used to say since Nigel Bradham, he's far exceeded anything Nigel Bradham did as an Eagle. He's the best Eagles linebacker I can remember in a very long time. And then you got, I'm trying to think of, the rookies, obviously he hit on, but what I'm trying to say is, your core is going to be your core, but when Howie can make those moves on the fringes and then turn into be, all-star. Oh, Mekhi Becton was the other name I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
When those moves start to hit, then you start to feel like this team's really got something. And that's kind of been the case. That was the case in 2017, and I kind of feel like it was the case this year.
Yeah, it absolutely feels like the case. And then Milton Williams is having an absolute career year. He's leading the NFL in pass rush win rate. Yeah. It's not going to surprise me when he goes out there and gets $70 million from another team because we can't afford to do that. I mean, maybe
it's
we
like
could.
Hargrave all over again.
It's like Hargrave, but this is a homegrown guy, and like we've seen him progress throughout the years. Hargrave was already good in Pittsburgh. Like we knew what we were getting.
Yeah.
Milton Williams was I believe he was a day 2 pick. I think he was round 3.
Yep.
And that man has just showed out every chance he gets. It's absolutely unbelievable. And the comp pick's gonna be nice, but it's gonna hurt the soul.
It is. I'll tell you who stepped up and when we absolutely really needed him to. Even before then, Josh Sweat, who had a pretty horrible year last year, and when you were looking at the right edge to keep, anybody with 2 eyes and a brain was going to tell you that you keep Hassan Reddick in the building. And how he elected to keep Sweat. I mean, I understand there was cost factors there, which make a ton of sense. But at that point, nobody thought that Sweat was going to find whatever he found this year. He's averaging almost a sack a game at this point since we started this win streak. And with BG being out, there's no better time for him to step up into that role. And then Nolan Smith is another guy who's kind of got hot at the right time. So, I mean, losing BG sucks. He was playing great football, but you had 2 guys kind of step right in immediately and fill that role. Plus, what you mentioned with the amount of pressures that Milton Williams is getting, if they can find a way to call the holds against Jalen Carter, like this D-line's still going to eat. It's not going to – losing BG sucks, but the pressure rate's not going to change.
No, it's not going to change. And, I was thinking, how much of Milton Williams' success is playing next to Jalen Carter? Like,
yeah, he's a disruptor. I mean, everybody. That goes for Sweat. That probably goes for Smith, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Jalen Carter just makes everything go, it feels like. I don't care what people are saying about him. It's just he's an absolute stalwart on the defensive line, and he's going to be here for a long time. How he's going to make sure he gets paid. I mean, a disruptor like that.
Yeah, he'll keep him. And that's, to your point, unfortunately, like, you pay a generational talent at D-tackle. Like, I mean, Jalen Carter's going to get a fat payday too, but you pay him. I would love to pay Milton Williams, but when you look at the reality of this team, there's a lot of checks that are going to come due, and I'm not sure if paying 2 top-line D-tackles simultaneously is in the best interest of the franchise. I'd sooner spend some of that money on Bond because we haven't had a good linebacker in decades.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to get your opinion somewhere else where while the team's playing great and the defense is still stout, we're taking some heavy hits in the second thing. I mean, against Baltimore, you finished that game with McCollum at safety and Ringo on the outside. And Avonte Maddox appears to be unplayable. I don't know what happened to him year over year, but he can't cover without he just can't. So I'm still waiting to hear it on the injury report. Maybe you know something I don't know, but losing Quinyon during that game is tough. Losing Blankenship during that game was rough. Slay seems to be week to week at best. We're getting a little thin in the back end.
Yeah, we are. I mean, Isaiah Rodgers has been okay. I'm not in relief of Slay. He's been serviceable. Quinyon, I was so scared when that injury happened. I thought, oh man, like the way it just looked, it looked like, okay, this is gonna be a week to week thing. He came back in, thankfully. I mean, if he has to miss any time, it's gonna be minimal, but I don't think he's gonna have to. So, and then of course, Cooper DeJean in the slot. That hopefully he stays healthy because, like you said, it's not going well for the rest of the secondary. I don't think Reed's gonna play this week. So
we're gonna have McCollum go opposite CJ.
Yeah, and then Avonte Maddox is the backup. It looks like he's been taking reps in practice this week at safety.
I'm glad they're doing that because there was talk of, I think someone asked Fangio about it, Initially, the question was moving CJ outside instead of Isaiah. Not CJ, moving DeJean outside instead of Isaiah Rodgers. But I mean, he also has service time at safety, so I've been hearing some buzz about why don't we just move DeJean back to safety. At some point in his career, maybe he becomes a Swiss Army knife, and that's great. As a rookie, he has mastered his exact role right now. Don't move him anywhere. Don't touch Cooper DeJean. Let him do his thing.
Yeah, you got to just let him ride out his rookie season in the slot. Then you could move him outside if Slay, whatever happens to him, if the contract he gets cut or something, or he retires. He is the oldest starting cornerback in the league. We were over this last week, I believe.
He's playing great ball though.
Yeah, so leave that for the offseason. Keep him in the slot now. You got a good thing going. Why touch it? Because this defense, it's probably going to look a bit different next year, regardless.
Yes. Well, I mean, hopefully you get Bond back, but who knows? Milton, we tend to think is going to go. There could be some moving pieces. BG remains to be seen whether he stays or goes. You brought up Slay. I think he'll stay, but you're at 34. Anything could happen there. There could be a lot of turnover for the secondary, but I'm hoping they get healthy and stay healthy at the right time because, it could be a special defense if everybody's healthy at the right time. If we can get everybody back. Speaking of being healthy at the right time, the team across the parking lot is completely unhealthy at the absolute wrong time. Sixers, I was there at the game last night, have fallen to 5-15, officially a quarter of the way through the season. And when we first talked about this, when Joel was not playing back-to-backs and PG wasn't playing back-to-backs and whatever, we were both kind of on the page of, man, I don't know why my audio is acting up. That's bizarre.
Yeah, I thought it was my headset for a second, but I'll talk while you work on that. I mean, 5-15, it's been no good, but get a look on the bright sides. We have potential rookie of the year in Jared McCain. Dude's a baller. I started to follow him on TikTok now. Love his TikToks. He's just out there doing his thing, and I gotta appreciate that. And of course, the montages and the memes have been aplenty with Jared McCain.
They are kind of cool. I'll give him that. It's pretty sick.
It's pretty funny when he says he does like a meme and then they go into like a montage of him just all of his rookie plays, just to be excellent. So there's some bright things going on. I mean, it's still gloom and doom over there on the other side of the parking lot. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's bad. But you're right. Jared McCain's been awesome, and I think in a different scenario where, I don't know. That might be a connection thing because I'm on even a different mic than before.
You keep talking. I'm gonna see what's going on.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, McCain and Maxey together, if they were both playing well, could have been special for the backcourt. And Maxey's not playing completely poorly, but he's definitely not up to his usual Maxey standards. So fortunately, McCain has been sensational, but it shouldn't even. It's one of those things that shouldn't even come down to.
Your mic's fine. It's my headset.
Okay, cool. So it shouldn't even come down to us relying on how good Jared McCain has to be on a night tonight. He was phenomenal again last night against the Magic. He had 24, I believe, 50% from three. But there's just Joel Embiid. I don't know what to think at this point. I'm sort of resigning myself to the fact that we might have already seen the mountaintop there, which really, really sucks because you built this team right now to win now with the 2 to 3 years you thought you had left of Joel's prime. If you don't have that, I mean, this is a complete dumpster fire of a team because you got an aging star in Paul George, a expiring star in Embiid, it appears, and a combined almost $100 million a season tied up between those two guys. I mean, you're really in a pickle.
Yeah.
Contractual help.
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to talk about Cooper Flag, but we will have to bring up at some point in the near future that our pick is conveyed to OKC unless it's top 6. I hope we don't have to get there, and I hope we just convey them a pick in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
But the ultimate doom scenario. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wasn't worried for the longest time of when you start hitting the quarter pole of the season and you are second to last in the East with really no reason to think the tide's going to turn. What frustrates me the most personally is that, yes, like, I know that Embiid has a ramp up program, and I know Paul George isn't playing back to backs. I get that. That was all well and good when this team was going to hover around 500, ideally 5-6 games above. That has to go out the window. That was the plan to keep those guys fresh for the playoffs. We have lost that luxury. We need to get this team to the playoffs come hell or high water, and it's extremely frustrating as a fan to see the urgency of the situation. And your team is 14th with a payroll of 3 max guys, and for the organization to be so thick-headed about, well, we got to keep them healthy for the playoffs. You won't get there this way. I promise you that. You will not see the postseason if you do not start getting more out of PG and Joel.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe it after watching the Olympics too. I mean,
he looked good. He looked healthy.
He looked good, and maybe that could take some of the blame for it. I don't know. Obviously, we're not the athlete. We don't have direct communication with said athletes, so we can't really tell. We're speculating here, but the drop off feels so steep. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I was excited for the Olympics for him because he always had the talent, but the one thing you could always kind of complain about with Embiid is he's missing that killer instinct. He's missing that. He was never the team leader. He was the best player by far, but he wasn't a leader. He never won anything. So you go to the Olympics and you spend all this time around guys like Steph or like LeBron, KD, like all these guys who had been there and achieved it. Drew Holiday is another one. And I thought he was going to come back with something like that and come back with like a different mentality. And he may have. I have no idea. It doesn't seem like it. I mean, he's come back and played 4 out of the 20 games this season. The publicity hasn't been awesome. The team meeting, which I never really completely talked about. I take Maxi's word as gospel on that because for a young guy to call out someone like Joel Embiid, that issue was becoming huge. So for him to say, look, Joel, you need to be on time for team meetings. Like it's like if your boss was late to work, you'll be late to work. And for him not to take that to heart and then come out publicly and say, well, whenever anything goes wrong, it's just my fault. I don't know what to do anymore. Not great.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Paul George did a podcast about that right after it happened. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely right. Paul George and what the hell's his name? Reggie Jackson discussed.
I thought I saw that.
Which is a whole other thing. I mean, look, we're doing a podcast, so obviously it's
I'm not hitting on for doing a podcast, but it feels like team issues that weren't supposed to come got brought up, and of course, I don't blame him for mentioning it because you could understand what his comment section would look like.
Mm.
They'd be like, "Oh, what's about that team meeting, Paul?" Like, and it's just top to bottom. So I get that he had to address it. So like, it's bad.
It sucks.
The trickle down effect. It all started with a leak, and that's where it just went terribly. I mean, I don't blame Maxi at all for calling a team meeting. No. I respect it. He's an awesome young player, but it's just everything that happened after that leak. It's just it's disaster worthy. Like it's terrible, but I do feel like all Philly athletes get that leadership treatment kind of thing. Mm. I'm pretty sure Bryce got it. If I'm remembering correctly on that as well. He got it when he got here. He's not in that conversation now.
No.
But Jalen is because he's quiet, and now Embiid is. So like you see, it feels kind of like the city kind of deal, but it does apply to this individual player right now because I totally agree with you. But just looking outward in.
You bring up a really interesting point that I hadn't actually thought of because you're right. Bryce came into Philly with a little bit of this, like this hothead, this showman. How is he going to fit with, kind of grittier blue collar city like Philly? And
fit's been perfect.
He fits perfect. He gets it. But when you really, until this season, if you take a look at Bryce publicly, like on the field, press conferences, etc., and Embiid publicly on the court, press conferences, etc., there's not a big difference in how they handle their team. Like that year, what was it, 2023, when everything went to shit in the playoffs. Bryce got a lot of heat for being, look, you're the best player. You need to be able to stop the slide. You need to be able to get in the dugout, rally the troops, stop the slide. That's not him. He wasn't able to do that. But I mean, he's revered because, the talent's there, obviously. With Embiid, it's interesting because the same generational talent exists. The same public perception exists. But the vitriol, like the hate that he gets, far exceeds anything Bryce has ever seen in Philly. And I never thought about it until you just made that comparison, but it's really interesting to think why one and not the other.
Yeah, it's interesting when you compare all three of these guys, actually, because Jalen still gets it. He got it this season when they were 2-2. I remember that. They're like, oh, is this Philly team on the downturn?
Relatable. He's
all this stuff. But I will say, Joel Embiid has not lost a home run derby to Big Justice. Just saying, but
that's fair.
That's fair. But anyway, it just feels like a tale of two worlds across the parking lots.
Yeah,
like, it just feels gloom on the one side and championship aspirations on the other side. But all three were supposed to have them,
Yeah, I think. So some of it, I think, is at least this year's doom and gloom. I can attribute a lot of it, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but the vibes that the Phillies team had more closely reflected the city. They were playing great ball. They're kind of loud. They were brash about it. They were having fun. Like, it's easy to fall in love with that team. So I think it's easier to look past whatever flaws might be there. The Eagles, it's a sports town, and the Eagles are having a great season, and they kind of embody Philly a little bit more. Nick Sirianni, love him or hate him, there's merit to both. He is as Philadelphia as they come. He's loud, he's unapologetic, he's exactly who he is, and the team is the same way. I think Philly has a bit of an identity crisis with the Sixers because they're nothing like the other two.
I agree.
There's almost no camaraderie. There's almost no edge. There's very little fight. They feel like losers. And I think that's why they get so much more hate, because if you take away that, I mean, Bryce and Joel have had similar Philadelphia experiences. Bryce has 2 MVPs to Joel's 1, but other than that, they've both been gigantic. Yeah,
Bryce has had that moment though.
He did.
He had them at the bank. Joel Embiid has not had that moment yet for the city.
That's true. And I guess the narrative around Bryce has changed permanently since then. He's one of the most clutch hitters in baseball, just across the board.
No one's ever going to forget that moment in Philly. Like, there's nothing. Yeah. I don't want to say that because
the swing of his life.
Embiid's an incredible player, but like when you talk like 40, 50 years from now, and nothing happens, like you're going to remember Bedlam at the bank for forever.
I agree.
Of course, Joel Embiid will probably go down as one of the franchise greats, but like if he doesn't have, he needs that moment.
Yeah, and I think maybe you just distilled down why they're treated so differently, because Bryce has given you a reason to believe it's going to be okay. Like, he's pulled us from the fire a couple times. Obviously, Bedlam at the bank is top billing. But you look at his playoff numbers, I mean, he's one of the greatest playoff hitters baseball has ever seen. So when you need Bryce the most, you feel okay that he's going to be there for you. And Joe has had extreme highs and lows. I mean, I think the Knicks series last year was his best playoff series by a huge margin. I mean, everybody thinks about that Toronto year where we almost made Eastern Conference Finals. Joe was bad in that series. I mean, we were in that because of Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, and Ben Simmons. Joe was bad. So the Knicks series last year, he was tough. He had, he was playing through multiple injuries, Bell's palsy, whatever the hell else. But he still fell short. With Bryce, no part of you thinks he's ever going to fall short. He has that like Superman mantra about him. And To a lesser extent, so does Jalen. Not that he's not as gaudy as the other two stats wise, but he's kind of the same way. Where if there's a drive with 2 to 3 minutes left, I feel pretty confident that Jalen Hurts is going to make some things happen. He's done it with his legs enough. He's made the big throw. Joe's just hasn't done that yet.
I'd put Saquon in that tier too at this point.
Yeah.
He delivers in every big moment. But back
the
to
heat on him's different because everything he does is a bonus. I mean, the microscope that's on Bryce, Jalen, and Joel is other.
Yeah, but Saquon might legitimately win MVP, and we'll talk about that if that happens. But like, there's a legitimate shot at that, which I didn't think there was coming in the regular season at all.
I think he's the most deserving. You can force it to Josh Allen, but the numbers don't support it.
We'll get to there. We'll talk awards because I'm pretty sure our guys will be in contention for some of them. So we'll get there at the end of the season. But I want to double back to the three sports teams and why they're treated so differently. I know that you love the Sixers. A lot of people love the Sixers. Yeah. I feel like this is a baseball town, and it's also a football town. I feel like those are like the top two, and then basketball is a third.
It is.
The city still loves them, but like when the Phillies are good and the Eagles are good, the whole city shows out. You know, we had that problem with filling the arena last year, like with Knicks fans.
I went to the Knicks game this year. The Knicks take over Wells Fargo consistently.
That never happened. I went to the Phillies Mets series this year. That didn't happen.
No, it would never happen at the Link either. But I think there's an element to that where it's a little bit of prove it. Like, I mean, the bank for the Phillies is, I think, one of the best venues in pro sports. I mean, it turns into an SEC college stadium for 1 month a year. It's insane. But you got to think what caused that frenzy. I mean, the Phillies historically are a bad franchise. There's more years where they're bad than good. So whenever we get a pod like this team, we're coming off of 11 years of desperation for playoff ball. So once people get it, they're frenzied. And then the Eagles is a little bit different because at most
consistently good. But there's been some bad seasons in there, and looking back on it, there's some moves that I'm glad we didn't make. You know, the hypotheticals, the Chip Kelly hypotheticals. Mm-hmm. I don't think we'd be a good franchise right now if we made any of those trades.
Yeah, but it's harder to overtake a football stadium in a football town because you only get you get 8 chances to see your team on any given year, and then bonus playoff games. To do what the Phillies do in baseball is impressive because you get 81 shots to watch them, and to still protect your home field is impressive. Basketball kind of falls into the latter category where the Sixers, they've been good since, 17. So we're on 8 years of being good, not great. So there's a little bit of a punch drunkenness, I think. And I think there's a lot of wake me up when it's time to care. I mean, we've seen the first round. We've seen the regular season success. So I think, and I'm the same way. I mean, I think fans are a little apathetic until, the mid-second round where it's like, all right, now you're showing me something I haven't seen 8 times before. I think the bank would lose its luster a little bit if, let's say the Phillies got stuck in a second-round rut for the next 4 seasons. I think even this year, the atmosphere at the bank wasn't quite what it's been previously because it didn't have time to build.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's just, it's one of those things where I don't think this town's going to lose trust just yet. I think it's going to be a while. Like you said, 4 years probably sounds about right. You have Painter coming up. Aiden Miller looks outstanding. Who knows if we're going to trade either of those guys. We're not going to trade Painter, obviously, but Crawford and Miller maybe. We'll see how this offseason shakes out with Soto and everything. I think he's going to be a Met or a Yankee. I don't think he's leaving New York. I think it's a pipe dream for that, but there's still other good free agents out there that the team can acquire. Starting pitching, bullpen. We need bullpen help.
I'm not even talking on the field product.
Oh, I know what you're saying. It's I'm talking on the field product because as long as Bryce is there and hitting at the level he's hitting, people are going to show up.
I think you're right, but I mean, we're talking about that 4-year window. That would put them. The Sixers are 8 years into this now. that would put them where the Sixers sit right now. I think if you have 7 Red Octobers that have resulted in nothing, you would see a shift in that frenzied energy because people are going to get tired of getting their hopes up. Now, if they win a World Series, reset the clock. Nothing matters anymore. But if they do what the Sixers have done, which is for 7 years, tell people you're going to contend and leave them brokenhearted, I think the same thing would happen across the parking lot. It would lose a little bit of its hype. Because you remember that first year the Sixers were good, dude. They broke Meek Mill out of prison to come open the game. I mean, it was a big deal then, and it's waned over time.
It was absolutely nuts. I feel like you're absolutely right with the window and it resets. I feel like the window could get slammed shut if it's another NLDS. I feel like this window can close very quick. If they make it to the championship series, okay, they're in our good graces still. They almost made it all the way. If they make it to the World Series, sure, same thing. But if it's a wild card or NLDS exit, I think this team could lose the town's graces really quick. And I think they kind of have after this year a little bit. People are starting to get kind of annoyed.
They're going to know how the Sixers coaches and players feel next year. This best friends, love the vibes, good times, I think is coming to an abrupt end this season.
I think it's going to come to an abrupt end this offseason. I think they're going to make a move. I'm not going to speculate on who gets moved or.
It's going to be Bohm. If they move anybody, it's going to be Bohm. I've heard that they floated Cassidy and Ranger. That would be to me not understanding what your problem is.
I agree. I think Ranger was hurt down the stretch. I really do. I don't know why he was. What happened?
And look, dude, when you needed him, he was their best pitcher in that Mets. No, Zach Wheeler was great. He was probably your best pitcher in that Mets series.
He was second best.
Yeah, you're right.
Wheeler did absolutely. That game 1 was absolutely electric till it all fell apart. But it's one of those things where sure you could trade Bohm, sure you could trade a couple of prospects. I heard George Kirby and Logan Gilbert being floated around. They're both fantastic pitchers. So Crochet is also being floated around. So like Dave Dombrowski, the one thing about him, sure he hasn't made his marquee trade yet. He did it with the Tigers, the all-in chip shove with the prospects. Obviously the Phillies farm is, I wouldn't say loaded because there's farms that are better, but it's a very good quality farm system.
It's top loaded
with studs at the top with Aiden Miller and those guys. And it's tough because I feel like the chip shove was this year, but it didn't happen. And it probably was for the best that it didn't happen. Of course, we traded away 2 great prospects for Estevez.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that and everyone's like, oh, they're ranked this and this. So it wasn't that big of a trade. In the re-rankings of Baseball America, they were top prospects. They were up there.
Yeah. But I mean, and that was Dave's version of a chip shove this year. But to your point, I kind of agree with you. Like at that deadline, there were so many impact players to be had, especially with outfield hitting. I mean, if you were aggressive, there were guys to go get.
Rosarena
is the one that's going to hurt for a long, long time.
He's been floated in trade rumors with Philly. I mean, for Bohm, so like he's been floated out there too.
Guys, it's a shame because I overall do like Alec Bohm, and it's been cool to watch him grow into the player that he turned into as a Philly. But unfortunately, guys like Bohm are your problem. That guys like Ranger have shown up in the big moments. You don't worry about him come October. Nick Castellanos, save for that Arizona series, I don't worry about Nick in October. He seems to like the bright lights.
He turns on when you give him the most.
It's the guys you like the most. I mean, Brandon Marsh has been historically awful in October, unfortunately. Alec Bohm's been pretty unplayable in October. So it's the guys that you really like and the guys you want to keep around, but this team needs to be built for October. So
it's tough because Schwarber and Castellanos' contracts are coming to an end very, very soon. Isn't Schwarber next year and then Castellanos the year after, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, I think Schwarber got they both got 100. 480. Okay, so then
I think he was 4 for 80 or 4 for 100. It was one of the two. So
that one,
back, and Castellanos got 5 for I think 100
even.
100 even, yeah. So, like, their contracts are coming up, and you have to make a decision. Trey's on the books for a ton of money. Bryce is, here for the rest of his life at this point. Like,
yeah, so is Trey.
Yeah, they're both here for, forever. And of course, Wheeler and Nola just inked new deals. So, like, they're the top of your rotation for years to come. I mean, Crochet might pass Nola with just how good he is. I know he was on an innings limit this year, but those names that are being floated out in starting pitching for I was about to say the Eagles. My mind's totally on football right now. The Phillies, they're legit number 2 guys. Like, they're legit would go between Nola and Wheeler, honestly, in my opinion.
I mean, our whole starting, if they do the Crochet deal, depending on who's involved, we could, our 1 through 5, Wheeler's an undisputed ace on every team in baseball. Probably not Atlanta. Other than that, he maybe Detroit, but most of baseball, he's your number 1. 2 through 5 in our rotation, I would argue, are 2 on most teams and a 3 on World Series contenders. I mean, because you would be looking at, let's in fantasy land. Let's say you got Wheeler. I'm still keeping Nola at 2, just for he's a horse, and if you're going to get Crochet on an innings restriction, I'd rather have him at the 3, but he could be a 2.
I think that was this year, though, only.
We'll see.
So, we'll see.
Either way, so when you got Wheeler, Nola, Crochet, Sanchez, probably, hopefully, Ranger, you see if he's involved in the deal to get him or what. I mean, that's a ludicrous starting 5.
Yep, and, it's one of those things where the starting pitching is good, and of course, it hasn't been mentioned. You mentioned it slightly. We have to keep up with the Dodgers, who are just deferring money into 2070. Like, at this point, like, it's honestly ridiculous. I mean, we can't complain about it. Honestly, us two and Philly fans can't complain because Howie Roseman does the exact same thing.
He just hides it.
I've checked people that there's Phillies fans complain about that. My friends, I'm like, don't complain about that because Howie's doing the same exact thing. But it's an arms race. And you got to keep up. So, like, Blake Snell is a huge ad.
He is.
For half a season, it feels like, half the season he's really good, half the season he's not so good. Just depends which Blake Snell shows up. But still, that's a crazy ad coming off a World Series. And Ohtani's going to get back to pitching. And they're probably going to get Roki Sasaki as well. Like, dude.
Yeah, the Dodgers are loaded. I think with them, at least for me, the arms race for them between the Phillies and Dodgers is hitting. I mean, their starting rotation next year is going to be great, but they're coming from a pretty lackluster one this year. Granted, it was enough to get the job done. Don't get me wrong, but that wasn't their strength this year.
I mean, the Yankees did play like little league ball there for a little bit. It really helped. That one game was oof.
So adding Snell and potentially getting Ohtani back, we'll see how they choose to play that.
And Sasaki.
And Sasaki.
He's got some nice stuff.
That brings their starting pitching to marginally better than Philadelphia. But the gap, I don't think it's a canyon-sized gap, really, especially if guys continue to take steps forward. Their lineup, ridiculous. That's where I think there's more of a gap
we'll see if they bring back Teoscar Hernandez. Teoscar, I always mess it up.
Was he a rental?
He was 1 year. 1 year, 18 mil, I believe. So we'll see if he comes back. He's expressed interest in coming back.
If not, buddy, come east. We could use you.
Yeah, we could use some hitting out there. I mean, their 1 through 4 spots are incredible. Will Smith kind of had a down year at catcher. I mean, so did JT as well. So it feels like for both teams. But after that, the lineup does get a little soft for them. I mean, Tommy Edman was an absolute lefty killer during the playoffs. dude, if Freddie Freeman didn't do what he did, Tommy Edman might have won MVP. Like, he could have sneakily won that.
So playoffs is all that matters. But we're 45 minutes into this thing, and I got to go to bed.
I can go all night.
Yeah, but I think we got a ton covered.
Next time I'll turn my headset on PC mode instead of Xbox mode.
Yeah, you had me thinking my equipment was shitty, but
I turned on the phone. I'm like, oh no! I looked over. I saw the little icon lit up, and it was Xbox. I'm like, ah.
It all worked out in the end. So to wrap up this marathon episode, thank you guys all for sticking with us. But I'm Brandon. He's Ryan. This is the Patterson Report. We'll see you next week. Peace.